All right. Hello, and welcome to episode 28 of the Money Talks. A little experiment we started in the middle of the lockdown, and which is now seen 28 founders and funders share their journeys with an audience that keeps on increasing week on week. I am pleasantly surprised with the love and the number of people that have seen the show, and how much they've appreciated the stories that come on board. So today we've got another very interesting story. Uh, a young founder with two exits to his name, and now part of what should be a unicorn in the next couple of years. I've got the one, the only Shivalik Sen. Shivalik, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Um, Interesting that you use that adjective. I was explaining to my friends, I'm like, even on LinkedIn, I was like, I am coming on the podcast, even though technically might not be a podcast, but of the one and only AD, as you're known. I think Anirudh Damani is not your moniker, right? It's AD, as we've always known you.
Yep, true. 80 is what I go by. That is absolutely true. But Shivalik, I think you're one of the. I think you were one of the first companies where I actually led an investment. I sat on the board. I worked, almost co-created with you guys how we should do the product, and then
Yeah.
also got the exit to Rapido. I think it was quite an amazing experience, simply because I wasn't doing the usual B2C stuff we do, but it was more like a B2B, solid B2B enterprise SaaS product. So we're gonna weave the journey today. I've been told by my team that whatever happens, this episode has to end at an hour. Otherwise, they're gonna kick me out of the episode. So I'm gonna be time bound, but I don't know whether we're gonna actually be able to finish the story in an hour. That being said, let's just talk a little bit about, you started off with at Don Bosco, and then you went over to BITS Pilani, Goa
Hmm.
campus. And after graduation, you had a couple of internship gigs before you started a startup called Driven. So what did Driven do?
That's right. So, just out of college, I actually joined a startup. I was working in this startup called Crowdfire. Um,
Achha.
I was there for a couple of months, and then I quit to start Driven with my co-founders, Arun and Someshwar and Nikhil, um, and who all actually quit their jobs to eventually join us in founding Driven. Driven was we were doing drivers on demand, and the idea was quite simple. You have driver agents everywhere in the country. So if you need a part-time driver, um,
Yep.
you will call up an agent and you will say that I need a driver for maybe 4 hours or 5 hours, whatever, and you pay $500. And we all of us had experience with this. My father personally used one in Kolkata, like a service like this, and in Bombay also it was quite common. And in Bombay, in fact, we saw that there was a massive use case for post party, like after party. You need a driver to take you home, etc. And we were like, okay, so that was the peak of Uber for X time, and we were like, okay, we got to build like Uber for drivers, driver for hire. Um, and one recurring theme that we kept seeing was that in Mumbai, if you go on the streets of Mumbai, you will see there are lampposts and walls which have all these flyers pasted that say driver for hire. Okay, so driver
Hmm.
Suvidha, driver for hire, something something, indiandrivers.com with a phone number. So we were like, let's be an aggregator of these agents, and that was the idea. That's what we started with. We built an app very quickly, prototyped, built a very simple app, and we hit the ground very quickly. That was one of the best actually things I've done in my entire entrepreneurship journey, was how quickly we hit the ground with Driven. We were there at these, outside these party places like your Toady Mills, socials, and Blue Frog in those days and stuff. We were outside those places at midnight handing out flyers and cards for our service, saying that, hey, man, you
Wow.
don't need to get a driver for 4 hours. Just get one for 99 bucks to take you home. And they were like, wow, this is cheaper than Uber. I'll get my car.
So there's one person who's really enjoying the story, which is Ankur Ved, who's the founder of Party Hard Drivers, who's saying he was listening to his own competition at this time.
Yeah.
Uh, but tell me a little bit about like what were some of the challenges that you anticipated in such a play, and how did you manage those challenges when they showed up?
So, see, we anticipated. So let me first talk about the two sides. Essentially, this is a marketplace. We knew that we had to generate demand and we had to generate supply both. So whatever we knew with our little experience, we knew that in such a situation, first you go validate whether there is enough demand or not. And
Right.
once you are validating that, you immediately start trying to aggregate the supply. So we started going to these agents, and the problem we anticipated was proven to be true, which was, in fact, you mentioned party hard drivers and Ankur. PhD were big, and most driver agents were already either tying up with them or were having the drivers being poached by them directly.
Hmm.
We anticipated that getting drivers exclusively on our platform was going to be a challenge. And I'll tell you why this is crucial. Like the exclusivity gives you the quality control because you needed your drivers to behave in a certain way, right? So we
True.
took the Uber for X thing quite literally. Um, we were like, we are gonna first cater to the premium audience, right? Because that's what
Yep.
Uber did, if you like remember. And we were like, which makes sense. You go on Mumbai roads, there is either auto rickshaws or there are luxury cars. There's nothing in between. And you're like, all these guys who are going out to party in their Mercedes, they will need a good driver at the end of the day, right? They want someone who's a chauffeur. and
Yep.
and right at the bat we had all of these things in our idea book. Like we could have different classes of drivers. Like you could have Uber for X and Uber Black and Uber Go and Uber Premium. You could easily do that with a driver on demand, where depending on your type of car you could like choose for the driver. The problem we anticipated was that, yeah, signing up drivers would be an issue, but we did not anticipate that it was going to be such a large issue, like getting them exclusive. Where these guys are like, no, I am a gig worker. I go to this agent, but I'm still not tied up with this agent. I go to three agents, and
Okay.
on top of that, I can still work with party hard drivers. So becoming just the fifth player on the supply side was an issue.
Was a challenge. And I think you said something very interesting. You said, how do you manage the quality of of such a play, and and for that you need exclusivity because you need to work closely with them. And I think that's where something interesting happened, right? That you started to rate drivers, from what I remember.
Yeah, yeah.
What was it all about?
So this came about after a brainstorming session between us founders and our mentor. Our mentor, our data and tech mentor, sort of guru, then was Sandeepan Chattopadhyay, Sandeep Panda,
Hmm.
as he's fondly known, who co-founded Just Dial, was the CTO at Just Dial. So, in the brainstorm with him, he was talking about how we could leverage the data. Like, okay, backtracking a little bit, we started giving phones to our drivers again to try and get exclusivity. Right? We were like, T-shirt de rahe. They're like, ye bhi T-shirt de raha. We're like, cap denge. He's like, ye bhi cap de raha. We're like, chal phone denge. Phone to le lo. They were like, हाँ ठीक है, phone रख लेंगे. So the thing was, the phone had our app, and the phone gave us like, we were like, okay, when we call you, you pick up. Otherwise, we take back all of this. The interesting thing was that allowed us to start tracking their data. Or in theory, we were like, we are going to start tracking all of their data. And the idea was that when the customer is giving a rating, we sort of check whether the data tells us that this driver, like the rating matched or not. So,
Hmm.
we had a crude idea then that, okay, we could use some of the data on the phone and we could probably verify that this guy is indeed a good driver, or See, at that time, we everything was basically all the ideas were sort of geared towards stratification. So we were like, okay, we'll stratify these guys, we'll create segments of these guys, the drivers ourselves. So we were
Mm-hmm.
like, we need to know who is the best driver. Like, how good are you? How smooth are you as a driver? So that the next time my loyal customer who comes in a Mercedes CLA 200, I'm like, dude, you take this guy. This guy is the smoothest guy. You pay me extra, but you will definitely enjoy his service.
And you, what were the parameters with which you came up with the score?
So initially, I think it was just speed. Um, when we started off, we just wanted to monitor speed. And then we sort of started digging deeper and we realized that using so speed can be done just through the GPS, right? It's a function of speed is a derivative of location. So you could do like a single derivative and get speed, although not accurately, but in theory you could. What we started, what we then realized is that we could do acceleration, we could do braking, we could do turning, and most importantly for Mumbai and for Indian roads, we could do bumps and potholes, like hard bumps and
Wow.
potholes. Yeah.
All from a phone. Was this, how expensive was this phone supposed to be?
No, no,
Do
not really expensive. Like any decent phone above maybe 6,000 bucks. Like the cheapest phone we worked with was a Micromax A1, which was retailing for 4,800 at that time.
Acha.
Yeah.
And
Obviously,
then
there was one challenge that we initially we needed the phone to be stationary. So
hmm,
stationary, and then you calibrated it so that it knew that okay, this is the direction that I'm going in. So maybe the
I
first
see.
few minutes of a ride we would miss.
So I you had a bunch of people also working with you. I think Someshwar, Nikhil, Arun,
Yeah.
and how did you meet these guys?
So these guys, we were basically like we were like our band of brothers. We met in college, okay, and it's a real. We go back a long way. We met pretty much within the first week of college. Uh, all of us turned out to be living in the same hostel, same wing,
Wow.
almost next to each other, like one room apart, two rooms apart, like that. And we all had different interests in college. We were part of the same larger friends group, um, and somehow it clicked. Like after college, when we started talking about starting something, I was actually very close to Someshwar, and I was constantly like talking to him. And then Somesh and Arun was at that time. He was in fact working in this really cool startup. He was working in this startup called Send, which was IIT Bombay
Acha.
founders, and he was handling operations there. And they were doing really well. Okay, this was like again heights of your tiny owl era, right? Like, lots of money in IIT
Yeah.
Bombay. क्या करेंगे? Like सब free कर देते. Like, but these guys are doing good, and he was handling ops, and he was handling like a lot of orders, liaising with B2C, B2B, everything. So I was like, Someshwar and I were like, okay, yeah, Arun, we have to get this guy will do like all ops related everything. So we got Arun, or Gandhi, as he's fondly known to us, Gandhi on board. And Gandhi was like, guys, like we need to do some sales marketing. Nikhil is the best guy. And Nikhil was working in Zepho in Bangalore. Yeah. So he was a BD manager there. So it was right up his
Zephyr
alley.
used
This-
marketplace.
Yeah, correct. So we convinced Nikhil. We were like, "Dude, leave your job. It's not worth it. Come back to Bombay." And he was in Bangalore. He had just moved. Okay, he had just taken a house and everything. We came down to Bangalore. We literally like dined and wined him. Like we fed him food. We got him drunk, and we were like, "Now come." And he was like, "Okay, fine, I'm in." So that was 2015, and yeah, we were together till 2018 end. So
Right.
4 years of entrepreneurship together, and before that, we knew each other for 5 years. So, yeah.
I think somewhere along this driven journey, right? I think you guys were at 9, 10 months into this. That's when we met, and I remember you guys pitching me this idea, and
Yeah.
and I think I found everything not so interesting except for one thing, which was your driver score. And I was like, how are you doing this? I just remember asking you, and then the entire conversation just completely changed into a whole different
Yeah.
direction. Uh, so what was that like? I mean, we met through Venture Catalyst, or was it why did we catch up? Well, was that it? Yeah. So what was that? What was that like?
Yeah, I think we still talk about that meeting sometimes. Like sometimes when we, well, not recently, but like in recent memory, like when we've still been, like in the whole acquisition phase and all, when, we've been working closely together, we've been like, वो एडी ने मतलब जीना हराम कर दिया यार, उस दिन क्यों मिले थे? And sometimes we will be like, damn, हाँ, उस मिले थे इसीलिए वो आइडिया पे आए थे. So it's like, very, very love hate that first meeting or recollections with you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. We walked into that room after, so it was the Venture Catalyst pitch, as you said. We were already highly referred at Venture Catalyst, and we were quite sure that we were going to get some money from there. They had two rounds. The first was a larger pitch to like the whole thing. And then there was that close vetting with some 10 or 12 of you all, right?
Yeah.
So in that close vetting wala thing, I think nobody else had as many questions. People were like, हाँ हाँ ठीक है B2C कर रहे चल जाएगा smart founders a bit से हो जाएगा. And we had a good team also by then. Like a lot of like Arun had pulled some really good folks, like his childhood friends and all, super sharp guys, CA, CFA and all, like and people from who went on, people from Cisco and whatnot. We had pulled. So we walked into that meeting. We were quite sure that this wasn't going to get derailed. And I remember it getting completely derailed by your questions. And by the end, when we walked out, I had a headache and I hated you. I was like, my God, if that guy hadn't been there, he would have gotten money by now. And you were basically like, but
I have never
like,
heard this story, by the way.
I don't think I've ever told you this. This has actually never come up, but with you. But yeah, I remember Arun and I were like, we came down and we were grabbing a smoke, like headache clearing wala smoke. We were like, क्या हो गया यार? आज तो मतलब अच्छा दिन होने वाला था. But like from the ashes of that meeting, sort of something greater got created, so to say. Um,
I
we
thought that the score idea was something very unique, because you did hear a couple of companies like that. Obviously, everybody knew about party hard drivers, but on the tech angle bit, right? That like this was something new. And when you said we can rate drivers, I thought that was like very very interesting. And so I think we met again after that. In fact,
yeah,
let me take this question. It's a very interesting one. If that meeting did not turn out the way it did, where would you have been now?
uh, very good question. That's a tough question. I'm not sure. I mean, I'll tell you what would have happened. We would have raised money with Driven. Um, and we would have basically gotten into a price war eventually with Driver's Cart and DriveView, because there were two large players in that space who were doing the exact same thing, like app based. And of course, PhD party hard drivers would have been there, having captured the whole Bombay market already. So eventually, it would have gotten into, we would have been into the raise and burn mode. I can foresee that much. Difficult to say, like, would have depended on our execution, marketing, pivots, and whatnot in terms of where we would have actually ended up. But yeah, definitely, like, would have spent at least, what, 2, 3 or more years working on Driven. Um, probably fighting for, the sort of smaller slice of a mature market.
I agree. I think it's always been difficult. Again, we're doing another venture in which we're having to manage drivers. And drivers are not easy to manage, right? And especially you know because they have many motivations. For them, every rupee counts. Versus for maybe some of us, every rupee may not actually count. But for them, an extra 1,000 rupees does matter a lot. But anyways, I think after that meeting we had another chat, and then we discussed this whole idea behind the score. I didn't understand the tech absolutely, but I did understand that it wasn't something very very simple to create. So I think then we explored the idea of how do we make that into a business. Do you and I think that was the second time we met. I think Arun reminds us that it was Mumbai T1 Starbucks.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Airport. Yeah. Yeah.
Apple.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You had a flight to catch and you gave us an unearthly time. You had a 9 a.m. flight or something, and you were like, let's no. Maybe an 11 a.m. flight, and we had to meet at some 8 or 8:30.
yeah. I said this is we
So
want 2 hours together. This is the only time we can probably do it. So
correct. And you had asked us to prepare the case for or if the driving analytics thing could become a viable business. And we did that overnight. I remember the four of us stayed up and we literally did that overnight. Um, and when we met you, I think we had a decent case prepared, but we weren't entirely sure or convinced ourselves about how big it could be or how important it was. Rather, it was more of like an exploration for us ourselves, and we were like, yeah, but this needs to be part of an offering and not the offering itself, etc., etc.
right.
But yeah, post that meeting, um, I think actually I'm a bit fuzzy. I think you were convinced in that meeting, and you asked us to drop by your office,
Yeah. I said I'll be back.
and you
Yeah. And I said I would lead the round. I was very
yeah
convinced on the new idea because I think it was a very smart utilization of tech. I think it was the same thing what ZenDrive was doing
yeah
at the time.
we
ZenDrive was
we we
actually
didn't even
using
know about ZenDrive then.
yeah,
We found out
and
while preparing for the final pitch that, oh, there is this $100 million company called ZenDrive.
and doing well, right? I mean, they were making I think from Uber they're making some 40 cents per kilometer or 40 cents per mile, if I remember. And all the engineering
Hmm.
talent was in Bangalore.
Yeah, data science talent. Yeah, I mean they became a unicorn a couple of years back.
So, but let's talk a little bit about like the pivot, because now obviously it was easy for me because I'm not invested into your idea for me to
Hmm.
suggest you guys should pivot, right? And like you said, it was a bit of a shock because the way it was suggested. What I'd like to know is, what was it that convinced you to say, you know what, yes, we should pivot. We need to change this, and we need to look at this a different way.
Okay, it's a good question. So I would put it down to two things. One was see most of it stemmed from our experience. It had almost been a year working on Driven. So most of it stemmed from that experience where um, we realized that we were probably not cut out to work day in and day out with drivers so closely, where we were like we used to live in a single, like a 1 BHK flat in Bandra, and that used to also be our office. This was pre getting funded. And we used to, from morning to evening, we had a steady stream of drivers coming to our house because the hall of that house was our office. And we had set it up with desks and computers and laptops to look like an office. And then if you went beyond the first door, that's where we lived. Okay. So now the drivers who are coming maybe don't know that, maybe they do. But for you, essentially, there is no, and this is true for most founders, there is no personal life anymore. Just that for most people, when your work and life merge, your work is not maybe as harsh or as physically demanding. And by physically demanding, I don't even mean like we were doing physical labor, but the fact that we were physically meeting with drivers from morning to evening, it was way harder than we had imagined. And like you said, managing drivers was so difficult. So we were constantly questioning ourselves that did we just bite off something more than we can chew? Are we sure we want to do this? Because we had more, bad days than good days when dealing with these guys. And and there were certain instances that completely, convinced us that okay, maybe we don't want to do this at all. For example, one of our drivers on the job was caught at a nakabandi, like by the police check, dead drunk, and he was behind. He was a driver that we had supplied to a drunk customer, like somebody after a party, and this guy turned out to be more drunk than the customer.
Oh my
So
God.
at 3 a.m., we got calls from the police saying he's employed by you. Please come to the police station. Your guy cannot walk straight for 3 feet on the road. So I mean, yeah, that was a nightmare by itself. Five of us went, like to show some strength and to make sure that we all didn't get beaten up. Five of us went at 3 a.m. because we were like, I'm scared to go alone. Like two of us go, we get beaten up. Like let's all go. But yeah,
Wow.
so thinking that we were like, okay, maybe like see at heart we are engineers, so it means I mean we aren't that good with people. Like you need to be really, really, really good people person when dealing with say drivers or well not just drivers, any gig economy workers, right? So yeah, that was one of the instances for sure. So what happened was when we started ideating about the driver score thing, right? And whoever we would talk to, they were also more excited about this. And the driver on hire thing was sort of grating on our nerves as well. It was getting difficult. Like ops was getting super difficult. Also, not to mention that it was super expensive, right? So when you don't have any USP for the supply, you can only have one USP for supply, right? Which is more earnings. Like
Yep.
till you reach parity with the market, you have to give them more earnings per order,
Yep.
which meant that we were burning through cash. So, we realized that unless we raise big and then we keep raising big, and we kept working the unit economics. Even after meeting you, I remember. So in our house that in that hall, um, uh, and before that, another house where we used to live, we used to everywhere that we used to live and work, we used to have a room called the war room, which is where we would like work, and we used to have huge whiteboards on the walls and stuff. And we used to have bean bags. So if you wanted to sleep, you slept on the floor on the bean bag, and you go to sleep looking at the numbers on the whiteboard. You wake up looking at the number. So I remember on that whiteboard for nights and nights, Arun like doing the math, the unit economics, and no matter how we spun it, it was always like losses. Like we were like, we know we're a B2C startup, like we're expected to make losses for a while, but at some point it needs to make sense. So that we were like, yeah, maybe at you need to either know some secret sauce about how to make this work, or you need to have a huge pile of cash to burn, because some scale it will go
Not
work
know
out.
whether you're Yeah. Yeah. But I guess, but for that, the supply has to get homogeneous at some point, right? I mean, you got to have some way of rating the driver before your rating system came in, like at least some sort of a standard that was available.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let's talk
definitely.
Vahan. Like, so what was that moment? You said, guys, you know what? Maybe this crazy guy is actually making sense. So we should probably pivot because you guys sold off. You guys sold off the company driver's cart almost instantaneously. What I remember.
Yeah, yeah, that was yeah, oh my God. Yeah, so that was our driven team actually. So that's Arun, Aman, Gaurav, Nikhil, and myself. I looked very different. But yeah, and Someshwar is not there. I think this particular photo is from the conference room of Astark Ventures in Bombay. So Hari, who is also on the board of Vahanalytics, was the first ever investor into Driven as well. And this was his workplace essentially. So we used to meet there to brainstorm sometimes.
And
So
how
the
did you guys meet Hari?
so Hari is like a he's a super senior of Bits. We met him actually at a Bits alumni meetup. Like I met him at a Bits alumni meetup in 2014 in Chennai.
Acha.
Yeah, and back then he was already talking about you know he had a successful exit earlier, and then he was a VC, like he was managing Astark Ventures, and he was talking about looking for entrepreneurs to fund and stuff. So we kept in touch, and Hari actually helped us ideate the drivers on demand idea quite a bit. Like he used to feel that pain a lot. He had a card and he used to take it all the time. So he was like, "I will be your first customer always." But yeah, so the Driven acquisition was quite very quick, very painless, which is also why we got no value out of it whatsoever. But we were already excited to be working on Analytics by then. And, like I said, we had a bad couple of months with our supply, and we were like, God, can't do this anymore. It's fine. Let these guys come and take over ASAP. So we had like one phone call with Vineet, the driver's card founder. And he was like, "Yeah, I heard you guys pitching this, that, blah, blah. What are you guys thinking? Do you want to, we are about to enter Bombay. Do you want to get into a price war with us? Or we could, join hands." I was like, "What do you mean by join hands?" He's like, like I could take a stake in your company and give you guys an exit. Um, Initially, just give me your customers and drivers. I'll take care of it. You guys go focus on the second idea. Um, and I was like, we were like, dude, that makes no sense. Take a stake, be an investor, and you take the ops along with it.
Makes sense.
So that gave us some added weightage, like because we had you as a lead investor, we already had driver's card investing, saying that, oh, this is tech that we want. And we had like 3 4 people already who had committed like some 50K USD, or probably a bit lesser, 20K types. So that really helped us by the time we went to pitch, if you remember, like
Yep.
to the larger group, because we were like, yeah, we are looking to raise 150K, out of which we've already raised, I think, actually we had raised 30 50K.
Yeah. I think there wasn't much left. You got oversubscribed, is what I remember.
Yeah, we got oversubscribed massively. Yeah, which was I think one of the lessons. Like, we shouldn't have let that happen. I mean, I think this is something that you realized as well, right? This was one of your first times where in such a huge group this happened.
Yep.
And we didn't have a system of saying no. And I remember you saying that no, this is like we have to abide by the rules that we agreed to in the beginning. Like, you have to be honorable about it. And we were literally throwing a tantrum. Like, we felt like special kids. We're like, no, but I can pick and choose. Like, why should I let 40 people into my cap table at
Yep.
small amounts?
And yeah, I think obviously lesson learned for me as well. I think it's important to have investors, but having too many small investors never actually works out well for the
Hmm,
start.
my
But you had
God.
three investors, three very interesting investment styles on your cap table. You had Pranam Marva from ThinkCubate. You
Oh,
had,
yeah.
Hari, you had from Astark, and you had me from Artha.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
when you look back at all three of them, and all I mean, all three of us are very good friends at the same time. But three very different ways. I mean, different ways of investing, different ways of looking at a startup, and different things that excite them, right? So how did you manage those three people, and what was that you took from each person for your own company?
Right. So, I mean, really good point. Maybe not something that we used to, do uh, very consciously, but we had different cadences with each of you, right? So we would meet you for a monthly catch up. We would meet Hari a bit irregularly because depending on his work schedule, sometimes it'd be fortnightly, sometimes once a month, sometimes we'd go like 2 months without meeting him. And Pranav, we used to have a weekly meeting with, because also he had just started Thinkubate, and we were sitting and thinking out of Thinkubate. So Pranav, we had a weekly catch up with, and with Pranav, it was really tactical. And you know, he's so young, right? He's like a couple of years older than us, um, and he had a great sense of like tactical decisions, like um, day-to-day stuff that we'd get stuck in with. I remember like negotiations with Adani. My God,
Mhm.
Pranav and Arjun, they helped us so much, because while I spoke to you once or twice about it, and you gave strategic inputs about it, but they were like there while the phone calls were going on, and they were literally like writing down things. No, say this now, literally like that. So Pranav, Pranav and Arjun, and mainly Pranav. Arjun again was there for the initial first year. Pranav and Arjun almost coached us to a large extent, like how to be uh, not overawed when talking to people like Adani and Reliance and Bharat Petroleum and stuff. How to actually talk like men and make sense, and not be over infectious with our energy and just be like, oh cool, hum to solve kar denge, hum apna tech dekho. With you, it was always more long term, because like I said, the cadence also sort of dictated that. Like, we met you once a month with numbers. We talk about what numbers we were tracking, whether there were the correct metrics to look at or not. I remember struggling to find a North Star metric with you for such a long time. Like,
Yeah.
we would, I would so I think Someshwar, Arun, and I once turned up to a meeting with you without numbers, and you were like, "There is no point of this meeting." And we had come 2 hours, like we had traveled 2 hours. So yeah,
The
so
next time I made it a point to come to your office and do the meeting over there.
I think so, yeah. And I remember Pranav was also there, and both of you were like, "Yeah, but like, guys, we need a North Star metric." But yeah, so overall, I think definitely strategic inputs from you, and long term sort of where are we going, whether this is the correct place or not. Asking really hard questions like, is this even the correct client for us? With Pranav, it was more like, okay, this is an opportunity. Now, how do we crack it?
Yeah.
And like I said, Pranav was always also bringing us opportunities. He was like, listen, I'm connecting you with these guys. I know that this is the size of the opportunity. I think it makes sense. And with Hari, it was mostly about fundraising and, you know, like the financial aspects of it. Like, okay, this is how much we have left. This is what the runway is. How do we look at this? Can we hire one more person? Should we let go of someone? Um, what kind of numbers to hit before we start thinking about the next round, etc.
So let's talk a little bit about, like, because now we've talked so much about what happened around Vahanalytics, we haven't really talked about what Vahanalytics really is or what, right? So maybe just for the audience that is here, what is Vahanalytics? What did it do?
So Vahanalytics was a driving analytics platform, where we could track any driver, initially just through their phones, and later through a combination of phones and devices. And I'm not talking about just location tracking, I'm talking about tracking their actual driving behavior and their behavior behind the wheel of a car. So when a driver is on duty, how well is he driving in terms of speed, acceleration, braking, like I said, sharp turns, bumps, potholes, whether he is distracted and checking his phone or not, whether he's texting, whether he's calling while driving, all of that. And that sort of collated into a SaaS platform, which uh, was sort of a driver management system. So, I mean, one of the things we had in the roadmap, and we never really got around to building it, was the whole the payroll system for drivers. Because while we had built all of this, and drivers were getting bonuses and penalized according to how they were driving. Of course, the extension of that is that you start handling their whole payroll, right? And then bonuses and penalties are on you. You know how to handle them. So
And
in short, yeah,
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
in short, a driving analytics platform which was largely phone based. The USP was that it was phone based.
And I remember that when we finished raising, there was this whole conversation whether we should actually announce the round or not, right? But the right announcement, the right amount of PR actually got us our first customer. Do you
Oh
remember?
yeah, absolutely. My God, that was one of the crazier experiences of my life. I remember firstly being completely uh, like just taken out of the blue when we were put on call with like a journalist, and there was someone from PR, and um, the PR person, like basically before the journalist came on call, the PR person was like, okay, I am from this organization, and I am there's a journalist who's going to join, and you are allowed to say these things. And I had no idea what they were talking about. So I remember the first couple of interviews went really poorly, like within that half an hour span. And in those couple of hours, we spoke to I think six journalists or something,
Yeah.
and we got a whole PR blast. Right, it was covered by everybody from Economic Times to Business Standard, etc., VC Circle, and all. And yeah, I think a month, no, a couple of weeks from then, Nikhil gets a call while we are in office at Thinkubate. Nikhil gets a call, and somebody's like, I'm calling from the CEO's office of Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone. We read about this driver performance system you guys have built, driver safety. Can you do something for us for driver safety? And Nikhil thought some random dude has called, and he's like, no, no, nahi chahiye, nahi chahiye. Well, not exactly, but Nikhil was like, what are you talking about, man? Who are you? This guy was like, yeah, I'm calling. Like, then he explained, I'm actually calling from, yeah, there's this person. And then we were like, okay, wait, Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone, let's Google it. Google it, the first thing you see is it's a $1 billion port. It's India's largest private port. And then we were like, oh, okay. Yeah, we weren't expecting to land a huge fish just right off the dock, right? Like we had literally just set sail.
Yeah, but I think what was the right kind of PR, right? Which you don't want to be in the newspapers just for the heck of it, but when you try to explain something that you're doing really for industry, for the enterprise space, it made a lot of sense to do that kind of PR. But after that, I think what was really interesting is the next step, which was to actually head down to the Adani port and camp yourself out there till
Yeah.
you get out the product for them, right? And you went from the nice plush offices of Thinkubate, and then straight to basically living with drivers once again, but this time in a different way though.
Yeah. In fact, we did that twice. So the first time when we went to sell them the initial product, and we didn't really have a product then, right? We had an idea, and we knew the driving analytics part. Um, but obviously, like we were too naive to sort of understand that we can't just go and tell them that, okay, see, we can track your driver and we can give him a score, and we can tell you guys how safe they are. Um, but the you need to build a whole ecosystem around your idea, right? Like as a um, SaaS product, as an enterprise solution, there always needs to be an ecosystem around your core product. And much later, like almost 4 years after that, I came upon a SaaS company who were building something out of Chennai, who were actually building the ecosystem before the core product. So just a side anecdote, but yeah, we never even thought about that ecosystem. We just went there. We were like, yeah, this is the core product, yellow. And they were like, "Arey, सिर्फ इससे क्या करेंगे? Where is your OAuth, and where is your sign on, and where is this and where is that, and where can I set my settings?" And we were like, "What are you talking about? We are not here to sell your suite." But yeah, I mean, we did eventually have to start building out all the parts of the suite to sell to them.
And obviously that one customer basically, in many ways funded the entire development of the product, and then you guys went a lot wider. But I think we at some point realized that we had to get more enterprise clients, and there was a challenge there. What can you talk a little bit about what the challenge was and where we were getting stuck?
Yes. Yes. So, um, okay. So two challenges. One, sales was a challenge because we didn't have sales first thinking. We probably still had B2C first thinking, right? And we were like, if you build it, they will come, which is one of the biggest fallacies in, being an entrepreneur. So sales, enterprise sales is a completely different beast. And in India, software is so undervalued. There is no value given for the software that you provide. The value is only for the service that you give at the end of the day, right? So along with that software, what these clients really valued and paid for was that we were so small, we needed them so bad that we would be up all night, all day, day after day, week after week, building out custom modules for them. And as you know, that is not scalable.
Yep.
So one client, we did that. They were happy. The same client, when they needed a different solution, we were struggling to meet with, like, keep up with demand. And we mistook this for, like, basically product market fit. That was, I think, in hindsight, a lesson. And the next few customers that we went to all said, yes, I want this, but I want it with these customizations. And we were like, cool, we'll build it. They will pay us. And that started killing us. I mean, the amount of money that we spent trying to build customizations, the amount of man hours and months and weeks building out custom modules for clients, a lot of whom didn't convert at the end.
Yep.
Um, you know, big lessons for posterity or in posterity.
What would be your let's say learning to impart to, let's say, somebody today in the enterprise SaaS place facing the same issues as you were? You know, things just getting way too customized to productize.
Yeah, I mean, first lesson, and this is what like Gandhi keeps hammering into us now, is you don't sell software to Indians. Firstly, never go with a I'm selling a software approach, right? Um, go with a this is my service or this is my value. मैं आपका there is only like there's only one thing, like, okay, software in the world does two things: it saves you time or it saves you money. Nothing else is like enterprise software. In India, it only saves you money. Time is also not valued. If you go tell them I'm saving your people का time, they're like, क्या जाता है, मैं तो इसको 20,000 दे रहा हूँ, ये कर लेगा, ये मैं 2 और बिठा दूंगा, सॉफ्टवेयर नहीं चाहिए तुम्हारा. Only if you can save them money very tangibly, only धंधा उसको टॉप लाइन बॉटम लाइन का जो डिफरेंस दिखेगा, बस, nothing else, right? So the lesson is, if you are selling software in India, you have to show how much money you are saving, like upfront, put it on your dashboard, like in big bold letters: you saved 10,000 rupees today because you use my software. Nothing else. Even if you don't save any money, you write that. Like, nothing else works, is my lesson. Yeah, quite literally.
Sticker
And you know sorry.
sticker shock. We need to see that. As in, yeah.
Yeah.
So in the, I mean, so the good thing is I faced a very similar issue with my own father. Right, two very different management styles in the same house, and you're right. I mean, for him, it doesn't matter why to buy a certain software or how easy it would be to share files, as long as it saves him money, right? As long as the money is saved, it doesn't matter whether you were sharing files using pen drives at this point, right?
Pen
And
drives. I was, yeah,
exactly. Like,
absolutely.
use a pen drive. Why do you need to have a Dropbox folder, or why do you need to use Teams to talk to people? Just pick up the phone.
Correct.
But it is a mindset. It is changing. But yeah, I think productivity gains aren't counted as much simply because India continues to be a very low labor cost market
Yeah.
even today. Right? If in additional 10 hours, it's not going to make a huge difference to the bottom line. So I remember, like, we had multiple conversations. Things were starting to go slow, simply because, like you said, it was getting difficult to sell to an enterprise audience that did not understand the value of productivity. But however, I think we you gave it another try with with Adani. You did another stint at their port before deciding to call
Yes.
it quits. So that moment, what was the reason why you said, okay, this I don't think this we can, I don't think we can scale this.
Um, so see, we spoke to maybe 20, 30 customers, and the learning was always the same, they needed like say a month of development time worth of customizations before they would agree to buy.
Yeah.
And A, that, and B, doing pilots. So when we went to do pilots with them and we said, okay, see, we are going to track your fleet of drivers and you are going to see perceivably how much better your drivers are getting in a couple of months. Pay us for the pilot. They agreed to pay us. They would pay us for the pilots handsomely, right? But again, what happened was they would expect end-to-end service during those pilots. We were not just software providers for them. They would be like, नहीं तुम जाके ड्राइवर को समझाओ कि वो क्यों खराब चला रहा है, मेरा मैनेजर नहीं करेगा, मैं अपना मैनेजर को फायर कर दूंगा क्योंकि अब तुम आ गए. सो वी वर लाइक, अरे यार इतना हाईटेक सॉफ्टवेयर बना के फिर से आके मैं समझा रहा हूँ ड्राइवर को कि सर ब्रेक मत करो. एंड दैट गाइज लाइक, अरे आपको क्या पता मैं 20 साल से गाड़ी चला रहा हूँ. आई एम लाइक, माय गॉड, फुल सर्कल आ गए यार 5 साल में.
and,
So
and
I mean, that was there, and yeah, essentially we were like, okay, see, we had, all of us had different motivations for being there. Okay, some of us wanted to see scale, some of us wanted to see impact, some of us wanted to be the next Zuckerberg and be a millionaire, etc., etc. But we were like, okay, in this space doing this, it's going to be a hard grind. It's going to be 10 years of this grind before we are maybe 100 crore company, if at all. So
yeah,
at some point we were like, okay, we didn't decide to call it quits. If you remember, the decision was, okay, let's start working with B2C companies. Let's start working with new age startups. Let's start, talking to the Zoom cars and the Olas and Ubers, and Rapido incidentally. So we started pitching to them to become our customers. We were like, hey, we piloted with Zoom car, we piloted with Ola, with Uber, everyone.
I think Acco was also there.
Rapido as well.
Ankur was asking a very
Acco,
similar
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
So we did think about insurance as a product.
Exactly, yeah. We tried working with ICICI Lombard, Acqui Insurance, everyone like Bajaj. Um, Forget the insurance. I mean, see, another in hindsight, another thing that I would like to say is the idea itself is not. Um, it's a very noble idea. Firstly, you're trying to actually reduce accidents and stuff. The way we tried to make it business viable maybe was not correct or not easy. However, it was wrongly timed, and timing is so important, right? And I mean, you've definitely seen this. Like you've invested in what, 50, 100 companies. I've lost
Yeah.
track. Like every year, I lose track of how many companies you're looking at and how many you're going through. And you know which of them are successful. And I'm sure one thing common, or one thing that is common for most of them, is that they get the timing right.
Yeah. And
Either you
sometimes
get the timing right.
you may even think the timing is right, and then the market turns right. Something like COVID happens. I mean, I was on a pitch in the afternoon today to a company which I had said no to, right? And 3 months later, COVID hits, and the founder says we went from a good to have company to a need to have company. And I was like, that's exactly the difference. That the reason we said no, because I looked through my notes, that the reason we said no was because this was a good to have problem. And I think that played a little bit of what we did with Vahan Analytics as well, was that I think people were just not ready. Today an ACO is much different than what ACO was maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago
Yeah.
when we were doing this company. And I think if we were just a year later, maybe a year and a half later, things would have been very different. You know,
My honest assessment, yes. Like maybe 2 years. We used to have this joke with our friends in Bombay, who used to be like, okay, so everything sounds fine. And what you're telling me is that people are slowly getting there. Regulations are changing, but not quick enough. Like you guys won't survive the regulations changing because the IRDA changed like once in 5 years. We knew the change is gonna come. We just didn't know if we would be alive by then as a company.
And also,
And our friends would be like,
we were done before Geo became big, right? I think
yeah.
Geo significant catalyst. Geo had just either Geo had happened a year earlier. I think things would have been very different.
So we yeah, you're right. We had a little bit of overlap with Geo, but the thing is, like you said, if Geo was already big, we would have been betting much larger on B2C first rather than trying to go B2B.
So then, tell me about. Let's talk about a little bit about this Rapido transaction and what are you guys doing over there now? What was it like to finally, hang the boots, saying we have to look through a new exist in a new bottle, and yeah.
So again, the Rapido thing, happened because Hari had introduced us to Arvind and the Rapido team back in 2016. And we had tried piloting with them back then, but we were both in such nascent stages. Like the Rapido app, we couldn't integrate our SDK with the Rapido app because the Rapido app was also really unstable at that time. Cut to 2019 when we met them, they were just starting to slowly go up. Okay, so they like when I say slowly go up, I'm saying in hindsight, looking at where we are now. But back then, when we started talking to them, they were doing um, X number of rides a day, uh, and which wasn't a very impressive number. It wasn't like, oh my god, how kind of number. You were like, yeah, okay, given how much you guys have raised, one would expect you to be here. But the like we had a really good connection with the founders. Like when we met them again after so many years, they were like, okay, listen, we don't have a data team. Um, so I mean, we pitched to them saying you need driving analytics for your bikers. Bike pe to accidents are even more fatal. And we had a whole round of discussion with them. They were like, fine, give us a solution, we will buy it. We were like, we don't have the solution for bikes yet. You pay us, we will build it for you. They were like, we can't pay you to build a solution and then you will go shop it and give it to the rest of the market. So then we were like, okay, then buy us. Uh, and that got them thinking. They were like, okay. And then they were like, okay, so I will buy you guys, but not just for safety because safety is a small part of what I'm looking for. In truth, I have a larger need, which is I need people who understand data because I don't really have a data science team at all. And we were too busy building a startup and building a company, a viable company, to actually have learned what it means to build a data science first organization, or rather a data science team as such, right? Because we had data science was one part of our team that was giving the insights and the analytics, but we had so much more, right? As a startup founder, you have to like know all of
Yeah.
this. So they I think they did look at it through that lens, and they were like, okay, so these guys are going to come with some of their devs, and we will get a team that can hit the ground running, that knows, that understands business, that know the importance of delivering, results and all your usual startup entrepreneurship sort of experience driven factors. Um, and I think that was what basically made sense for them. Um, Having said that, they knew that obviously they have to still invest in, letting us hire, letting us build out a team, get more people. And they asked us honestly, they were like, what do you think? Like from a data first point of view, do we hire, do we look and hire like a leadership role from somewhere in, in the industry? And both, we were like, absolutely, yeah, because, you know, we have learned one side of things. You need somebody who's like really been razor sharp focused on data as well after you've got it. So yeah, we had a long round of negotiations with them, uh,
So I know we're
and
coming to the end of our time, but
yeah.
last questions that I have, and I think some of that also coming from the audience. I think Saurav Ghosh asked ask, what are some of the data science problems you're solving at Rapido?
Right. So we are solving a whole range of problems. Retention, acquisition, cost optimization, all of these are there. These are common across all organizations, right? And everybody will relate to these. Like, say your Microsoft also works on these, Google also works on these, we also work on these. Some of the unique problems that we are solving are very, very uniquely related to, say, gig economy sort of ecosystems, and especially transportation based gig economy systems. So,
Hmm.
um, for example, a lot of our requested rides do not convert into a final net order, right? Like, the customer wants, the demand is there, there's latent demand, but for some reason it drops off. So uh, basically, one of the things we figured is because a lot of times the guy who's coming to pick you up on the bike, he has to travel more in the first mile. We call it first mile, which is essentially the pickup distance. He is traveling more in the pickup distance than the final, last mile of the order. So it actually, he's at a loss when he's doing that order. So, like, looking at the economics of each ride, like unit economics of each ride from a marketplace point of view, that itself becomes like a huge sort of data problem that you're solving, which is sort of unique to this space, along with, like I said, some very generic or general problems like customer retention, segmentation, targeting, acquisition, all of those.
And one thing, yourself, I think I was going to say 5 years, but Shashwati Banerjee asked you, where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
10
Dr.
years from now,
Shivalik Sen?
dude, 10 years is, I cannot honestly see 10 years ahead. Um, 5 years ahead, I would like to be working on um, some very relevant and pertinent problem statement for sure. Whether that's, as a part of a larger organization or doing something of my own. I have realized one thing, like the whole entrepreneurship thing is, that bug can be sort of fixed as long as you have ownership. So wherever I am 5 years, 10 years from now, I would like to have ownership and, accountability for what I'm working on.
No, great. Thanks so much. I think Shivalik, that comes to the end of our. I know there was a lot more things to talk about. There's so many more moments during that journey because if you remember, we started actually by tracking bikes and not cars, and we decided to pivot to cars. So there were so many pivots that we
Yeah, because bikes,
unfortunately
it was too hard. Correct.
it's too hard. Yeah, there's just too much noise. I remember seeing the graph and we just can't make sense of this. But let's move on to rapid fire. This is the part of the uh, you know overall flow that you obviously are not aware about. So I'm going to ask you a quick series of 10 questions. Whatever first comes to mind, you answer that. And in meanwhile, if there's anybody else asking questions, we'll take them right at the end. So let's get started. First question is the Peter Thiel question. One thing that you know to be true, but very few people agree with you on this.
Mm, that okay. So most most drivers that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, cabbies, bike drivers, delivery boys, etc., they actually have a notion of how the customer sees them, and they're not sort of bad people, um, which is why I interact with them very differently than how most people interact with them. You can actually talk to them and have a human conversation with them. Um, Rather than, I think, what most people want to do, which is not have any kind of interaction with them. And the lesser interaction you have with any gig worker, the happier you are, right? But oftentimes you sort of understand the
Hmm.
nuances of their business and what drives them to behave like that or be like that if you talk to them a bit.
True. I think it some of the most insights about what kind of products we should be building, even from a fintech or a enterprise tech angle, you can understand by speaking to some of these guys. One piece
Yeah.
of advice to founders about fundraising. I think you've got some good insight here.
Sorry, I missed that. One piece of advice.
To founders about fundraising.
Uh, Fundraising. Okay. So be see if you are working on something that you're sure about and passionate about, and there is a that there is a large market for fundraising will happen in due time. Don't divert energies from actually building what you're building for just for fundraising. And like
That's a very
a sort of add on to this is as first time founders, most people will sort of be like, okay, fundraising is it, I have raised money, now I'm my job is done. Your job starts after you fundraise. Okay, like if like just realistically speaking, if we had not ever raised those 150K from VCATs and including yours, um, we would have maybe given up much earlier, right? Because we had opportunities to be acqui-hired much earlier, and we wouldn't have fought and ground our way through like sleepless nights and like barely be able to pay rent and stuff, because we always had that responsibility that we you have that responsibility once you fundraise, that you have to give that return to the shareholders, to your investors, and that responsibility does not lie easy, and it shouldn't. So don't look at fundraising as like the first objective. Almost look at it as a necessary evil.
yeah. Who's your favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero? Batman, because he doesn't really have any powers, but he's still like kicking ass with the rest of them.
Good. Scaling before profitability or profitability before scaling? What do you choose?
Depends. B2B profitability before scaling, B2C scaling before profitability.
Yeah, I think it's very good advice. I think it is important B2C to get at least your beachhead before you start thinking about profitability. If you could pick the brain of one person for 24 hours, ask them anything you want, who would it be?
Uh, I heard if I could pick the brain of anyone for 24 hours. I'm not sure if there's anything after that. But if that is the question, then I'd say Bill Gates, because he's built one
Shivalik,
of
did
the
you get my
most.
question?
Yeah, could you hear me? I just started. Hello. I can hear you.
Hi guys, can
And
you hear me? Shivalik, the question is if you could pick the brain, sorry about that. If you could pick the brain of one person for 24 hours and you could ask them anything you want, who would it be?
yeah, so I just started answering that. Bill Gates, because he built quite possibly one of the largest organizations, largest, most perpetual and infinite organizations ever. Starting from being just builders of software, uh, scaled amazingly well into a leadership role, and got so successful that that company had to be broken up by the US government and stuff. And even after that, um, he continues to be a thought leader in, say, solving some of the most important problems facing the world right now. And he really seems like a nice guy in all his interviews and stuff. So, Bill Gates.
What's one thing you would like to change about the Indian startup ecosystem?
Uh, the Indian startup ecosystem. I think I think it's something that is changing already, which is great to see. This is something that I used to feel myself while a couple of years back. The bias towards having people from premier colleges in your team, um, and I'm from BITS, which is considered a premium college, and recently on Twitter there's been so much chatter about how BITSians are great, uh, etc. But some of the smartest people I've worked with, haven't been from any well-known engineering college as such. On that note, an extension of that is, I think, a bit more diversity in teams, I think, would be good. Like all startups tend to be like just engineers or MBA grads.
Yeah, actually, hiring people that don't look like you or talk like you, that is such an important part of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know, are you a morning person or a night person?
I am a night person trying to become a morning person.
And are you hiring in your team at Rapido?
Absolutely. Yeah. We are hiring in whoever is watching this. We are hiring for product people, data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, big data engineers, ML engineers, developers. Anything you can think of, we are hiring for pretty much.
And what should that person bring to the table, and how can they reach out to you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, definitely. Drop me a note wherever. What you should bring to the table is you should be responsible enough, be accountable, and be driven. Like we cannot. In a hyper growth startup, you don't have time to coach people and handhold people. So even if you do not have the skills, but you know that you can learn fast, be ready to put in that effort and learn, and then just basically drive yourself towards the results or towards the targets that we'll set. I mean, it
Great.
sounds like very cliched startup trope, but it's very true. Most startups, I think, will agree.
And last question: 3 books you would recommend to founders.
Three is okay. Definitely Zero to One, Peter Thiel. The hard thing about hard things by Ben Horowitz,
Yep.
because it'll connect with you on an emotional level when you're having bad days. And you should always, I feel like you should always read a bit of science fiction, because or any kind of fiction. Science fiction is my favorite. Um, Fiction helps you be creative and think of things that are not true and how you can bring them to life. So whatever is your fiction of choice, whether it's Harry Potter or Isaac Asimov, whatever. I personally recommend Isaac Asimov. He's my favorite science fiction writer of all times. If you want to start with I, Robot, which was a very famous movie as well.
No, that's great. I mean, Shivalik, like I said, there were so many topics to cover, and I
Yeah,
think we somehow have meandered our way through finishing all, at least touching upon most of them. We'll have to do another talk in the future to go through the remaining parts of our story. But that being said, thank you so much for being on the show. I think your journey, it not every startup journey has to be massive to learn a lot from it, right? And I think regardless of even if Rapido does not turn out to be a unicorn, or whether you know it wherever we land up, I think your journey is so interesting because it teaches so much about B2C, B2B, B2B2C, and and just staying at that job, right? Eventually, like you said, you came a full circle, came back into dealing with drivers again, but just trying to figure out the problem. And I think that I've really enjoyed working with you, very closely for the 3 years, 3.5 years we were doing Vahanalytics together. And ever since we met in Bangalore before the lockdown a couple of times, grabbed a few beers, and it's always exciting to hear you and Someshwar talking about all the problems you guys are now solving at Rapido. So thank you very much. Really enjoyed the
likewise.
conversation like always. Just stick around. I'm gonna say bye to everybody else. Bye everybody. Shivali, any final words before we shut for the night?
Thank you so much. I had a really fun time. I knew this was going to be a fun chat, and I knew there were some stories that we wouldn't have exchanged before, even though, uh, we've spoken a lot. Yeah, so next time, I mean, always looking forward to hosting you. Whenever you're down here or we are in Bombay, I think we'll have a great time catching up.
Like I said, in a month you'll figure out that I'm going to be in Bangalore a lot more often than you think. So
Mm, I'm
with
looking
that,
forward to
guys,
it. That sounds good.
thanks a lot. See you guys next week with episode 29 and another founder that we'll be having a chat with. Shivalik, just stick around for a